Today we're going to create a balloon pop game as originally created by Jason. And the balloons are going to come up from the bottom using the bullet behavior. You're going to be able to click them or swipe them if you've got a swipe touch tablet to blow them up. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to use a screen size slightly different than what we've used in the past. So if you want to load up a blank sheet, and then we're going to use 650 by 960 as our layout size. And then we're also going to change our window size to the same value, so 650 by 960. Now that we have our screen size, we're going to zoom out just a little bit, and what we're going to add to start with is the background. So let's go ahead and insert an object. We're going to use a sprite just because this one isn't a tiled background, it's just a regular image. And you can go ahead and use the background provided or find a different one. And this is a little bit larger than your screen, but we'll just go ahead and get it centered up however you'd like, depending on where you kind of want your background to sit. Okay, let's create a balloon sprite. We're going to put it up top here above the game. So we'll do Insert, Sprite. We'll click up here. Now this one's going to have a lot of different animations. So I'm going to show you all of them, and then you can go ahead and implement them yourself. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename the default animation, and we're just going to call it Balloon 1. And this is going to be our first balloon. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set this speed to 0. And the reason we're going to do that is we don't want the animation to start automatically. We'll start the animation when the user clicks or pops the balloon. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load the animation frames. So if you right click, import frames from files, you'll see we've got a bunch of different colors. So we can just go ahead and start with the first one, the blue one, and we'll click the first one, and then we'll hold down the shift key and click the last one and bring them all in. We'll hit open, and then we're going to delete frame 0 because it's blank. Now that we have the first balloon loaded, we're going to use this, and we're just going to right click, and we're going to say duplicate, and we're going to call this one balloon 2. Now the reason we're going to use the duplicate is because it actually will copy over the images, but also the speed. Then we don't have to change it each time. So once we've done that, we can come down here and we'll delete all of these. You can't delete the last one, but that's okay. Then we're going to right click again, import frames from file. Now we're going to pick the next color. So I'm going to pick the green ones, hold down the shift key, click 1, and then click 6, hit open. Then we're going to delete frame 0 because it's blue, and there we have it. You don't have to load them all. You can load as many as you'd like. There's 7 individual colors. You can load, if you just want to load the first 4, just make sure you name them balloon 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, each time we do this, let's right click, we'll say duplicate, we'll call it balloon, the next number, and then we'll import that. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of mine. Now you have all of the balloons loaded. So you'll notice they're numbered 1 through 7, and if we click on each one of them, you can see that all of their speeds are set to 0, and they have all of their frames loaded. So yours should be the same. So we can go ahead and close this, and now we can go ahead and name this, and we're going to call this balloon. And then while we're naming things, let's name our background. Now let's go to the event sheet and dynamically create a balloon. So on the event sheet, we're going to continue to use the same methods that we've used in the past. We're going to use this one called every. So we're going to go ahead and add a new event under system, and we're going to say every X seconds. And then we're going to use random, and we did this last time. We're going to say 0.2, 1. So that will pick a random time between 0.2 seconds and 1 second. Now the action is going to be to create a balloon. So we're going to go ahead and say system, then we're going to use create object. Then we're going to pick our balloon, and then we need to say where on the screen we want. Remember, the x-axis is the one that goes left and right, and the y is the one that goes up and down, and 0, 0 is the top left corner. So we're going to dynamically, randomly pick a size going left to right. So our x, we want to say random, and the values are going to be 0 on the left and 650 on the right. All right, so that's anywhere across the width of the screen. Now the Y we want to create at the very, very bottom of the screen because we want it to spawn at the just off the bottom. So we're actually going to say 960, which is the bottom. That's from our layout size. And then we're going to add a little bit to it so that the balloons actually spawn below the screen. So you see them come onto the screen. And so our balloons are about 200 or so pixels high. So we're going to say plus 250. All right, so now that we've got the balloon created, we actually need to add the bullet behavior. So let's go back and we're going to add bullet to our balloon. So we're going to say balloon or bullet. All right, now that we have the bullet added to our balloon, let's go ahead and set the angle of motion so that it's going up instead of by default to the right. So we're going to say balloon, we're going to say set angle of motion. And we're going to pick 270, and if you remember, 270 is going straight up. 0 is going to the right. In addition to the balloon going up, we want to change the speed so they're not all going at the exact same time. So now let's go ahead and add balloon, and then we're going to say set speed. Now make sure there is actually 2 set speeds. There's also a set speed on animation. Make sure you're using the bullet speed. And then we're going to use the value random, and we're just going to go ahead and pick a value, say 350 by 450. The default is 400, so that'll make some a little slower and some a little faster than the default. Now that we have our balloons created, we're going to want it to pick one of the different animations. So let's go ahead and use this new feature called choose. So we're going to say balloon, and then we're going to say set animation. You remember we created up to 7 animations based on the colors. So we're going to tell it which animation to use. So we're going to say set animation. Now this is looking for the name of the animation. So if we put in double quotes, you'll see all of your balloons listed here. And what we're going to actually type in here is we're going to say choose, and it's a function that allows you to pass in a number of different values, and it will just randomly pick one. So we're going to say choose, and then we're going to pick each of these balloons. So each time you hit, you have to put commas between them. So balloon, comma, and then in double quotes, balloon 3, comma, double quotes, balloon 4, comma, double quotes, balloon 5, comma, double quotes, balloon 6, comma, double quotes, balloon 7. And then you need to end with that parenthesis, so it'll look exactly like this. Choose balloon 1, I've got a typo there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, or how many ever you have. If you only did 4, then you just go through 4. So now click done. So now it's going to create a balloon, it's going to set the angle of motion to go up, it's going to randomly adjust the speed, and then it's also going to randomly pick one of those 7 balloons. Now let's go ahead and test it and see what happens. Okay, so you see our balloons are actually all sideways. And the reason they're sideways is that bullet behavior wants the balloons to face the direction in which they're going. So we're just going to change this real quick. So we go back and we go over to the layout and we click on the balloon. In the bullet behavior, there's a property that says set angle. If we set that to no, then it won't rotate the balloon as the bullet's taking off. So let's go ahead and test that again, and you'll see the balloons will now be right side up. Excellent. Now you see the colors are all different, or they're all different, but I mean they're different, randomly picking a color. And then also notice that the speed is a little bit different, so some of them are going a little faster than the others. Now we're going to set it up so that if the balloons go off the screen at the top, we can go ahead and destroy them. Otherwise they go forever. So the way we're going to do this, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but we're going to use a couple tricks here this time. So we're going to add a new event, and we're going to say balloon, and we're going to use this compare y, and we used this on the last game as well. So the y value is the up and down, and remember the top is 0. So if the y, and we're going to say is less than or equal to, and we're going to say about the height of the balloon minus 0. So we're going to say minus 200. So when the balloon gets up to the top and is beyond 200, that's when it'll get destroyed. So with that, we'll go ahead and add balloon destroy. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create so that when you swipe the balloon, either with the mouse or if you have a touch screen with your finger across the balloon, it's going to pop. So what we're going to do there is we're going to go back to the layout and we're going to add an object. And we could use mouse, but mouse won't work on a tablet. So we're actually going to use touch, and touch will work on both. It'll work on a tablet as well as your mouse with the computer. So we're going to go ahead and add that. And just like with the mouse, it doesn't do anything. We just now have access to the touch. So now coming back to the event sheet, we're going to go ahead and add, and we're going to say touch, and we're going to say on tap object, and then we're going to pick our balloon. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start the animation. Now if you remember, we set animation to 0, so it wasn't playing. So all we're going to do now is we're going to set that to a value. So we're going to say action, balloon, and this is where we're going to use this other one that says set speed. And this is the animation speed. We were using the bullet speed a minute ago, but now we're going to use the animation speed. And you can pick a value depending on how fast you want it to run. 15 is fine. You could do it a little bit slower, a little bit faster if you'd like. So now go ahead and test that, and we'll see if that works. All right, so there's our balloons, and if we click them or tap them, you'll see this animation starts and they go through. Now you'll notice they don't disappear as part of it because that last animation frame was not blank. So we'll fix that next. So now we want to destroy our balloons once the animation finishes. Now we can't put the destroy right here because what will happen is that before the animation finishes playing, the balloon will get destroyed. There's actually an easier way to do it. What we're going to add is we're going to say balloon, and this is an event, and we're going to say on any finish. And this is when any animation finishes, this will get called. So when that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to say balloon destroy. So now it's going to destroy the balloon at the end. So let's test that, and you'll see those little fragments aren't going to be there anymore. All right, so you see that now the fragments get destroyed because the entire balloon object gets destroyed. Now let's add a message that shows up that says you missed a balloon if they go all the way off the screen at the top. So on our layout, let's go ahead and add a new sprite. And we're just going to go ahead and put this in the middle here. And we can go ahead and load. There's an image that says missed one, and it's a little kind of a button-shaped message. And we'll go ahead and just kind of center this in the middle of the screen down here. Then we're going to add a behavior to this, and we're going to add the fade behavior because we want to be able to show this and then have it fade out. So we'll add the fade behavior. All right, so now let's go ahead and name this. We'll call it missed one. The other thing is we don't want it to be visible when the game starts. So let's go ahead and set this to invisible. All right, so now on the event sheet, when the balloon gets above the screen and it's off, when it gets destroyed, at this point we're just going to go ahead and flash. We're going to show that message and then start the fade. So we're going to go ahead and say action. We're going to add another action, and this will be row 2. And we're going to pick the button. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go all the way to the bottom, and we're going to say move this to the top because we want it to appear on top of all of the other balloons. So if there's a balloon coming up when this displays, we want this to be on top of the balloon so you can see it. Then the next thing we'll do is we'll say missed set visible, and we're going to make that visible. And then the third thing is we're going to do missed, and then we're going to say restart fade. And so that'll start the fade. And the reason we're using restart instead of start is that if multiple balloons go off at the same time, we just want to continue to show that and continue to do the fade. And then one more change we need to make before we test this is right here on the fade behavior. We need to make sure it does not get activated on start. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to set this to destroy after fade out to no, because we're going to reuse this over and over again. So if the multiple balloons go off, we want to be able to restart that fade. Otherwise, the object gets destroyed. So let's go ahead and test that. So there you go. So each time a balloon gets up and goes off the screen, it says missed one. And if we pop one, if I'm fast enough, those ones won't trigger it, which I'm not very fast. Now we'll go ahead and keep track of the score. So let's add a global variable, and we'll call it score, leave it number, and initial value is 0. And remember, these show up at the top up here. Now go ahead and add a text field so that we can actually display our score. And so I'll put mine here in the top right-hand corner. And we're going to name this score label, or we'll just call it score text. And then we want to adjust the size too, just so that it's a little bit larger. So we're going to use about 22. And then I'm also going to just adjust it so that it's right aligned and centered. Then the last thing I'm going to do is set it to 0 so that it actually shows up as initially 0. Now that we have our text field back on our event sheet, we're just simply going to keep track of that. So anytime you touch a balloon and you pop it, we're just going to go ahead and say system, and then we're going to say add to, and then it'll be 0 or score in 1. We'll click done. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to update that text field so that it shows what the score is. And if you remember from last week, we used the object call, or the event called every tick. And every tick will then just keep that variable updated with what's on the screen. So we're just going to go ahead and keep track of the actual text. So we're going to say action score text, and we're going to say set text, and we're going to set that equal to our variable called score. And remember, the score has, or the variable has the little globe on it. There you go. So now we can run this and test it, and we should be able to keep track of the score. There you go. So each time we pop a balloon, the score increases by 1. And if we miss one, it doesn't do anything with the score, but it does show that we missed one. So now let's go ahead and subtract 1 from the score anytime we miss a balloon. So we're going to go back up here to 2, row 2, and we're going to add another action when the balloon is off the screen, and we're going to just simply subtract 1 from the score. So system, subtract from, score 1. So now anytime we miss a balloon, we'll subtract 1. Now, if you tested your game, you probably noticed that if you missed a balloon and your score was 0, your score became a -1, and it can continue to be negative values, -1, -2, -3 every time you missed one. Now, if we don't want that to happen, we can go ahead and adjust this by saying only subtract 1 from the score if the score is greater than 1. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a sub-event to number 2. So right-click over here on the left, and it's kind of over here in between the balloon and the number 2, there's a little spot there where we right-click. And we're going to say sub-event. And then we're going to say system, compare variable. And we're going to say if score is equal to 0, is greater than 0, then we're just going to drag this score down here. So if the score is greater than 0, then subtract 1. Otherwise, it won't do it. So it'll only do it if the score is greater than 0. So let's give that a test. So you see our score is 0, so we should not be decrementing it. It should still show that we missed. Now if we have 1, then it'll go ahead and subtract 1. And so if we have a score greater than 0, then we'll lose points for missing balloons. Our game is looking pretty good. The next thing we'll add is a game over. So what I was thinking of doing here is we'll give the player some number of seconds. You can pick whatever you want. I'm going to pick 15 seconds, but you might want to do 30 seconds. So they've got to see how many balloons they can pop in 15 seconds. and then it'll just simply display game over. So to do that, we're going to create a timer on the screen, and we're going to keep track of the seconds, and when it hits 0, we'll go ahead and display that the game's over, and then you'll be able to see what the high score is. So the first thing we're going to do is let's add the game over image. So back on the event sheet, insert Sprite, and you can go ahead and load the game over image. And we're just going to place that, about here, right above our missed one. And then we're going to set the initial visibility to invisible because we don't want that to show up until the end of the game. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually show that timer on the screen. So we'll go ahead and add another text box, and we're going to put this one in the top left-hand corner, and we're going to call this one timer text, and then we're going to set it to 0, and then we're going to make the font larger as well so we can see it. I'm making mine 22, and just make that box a little bit bigger so that it shows up, and line it up here in the left. So now what we're going to add is another global variable, and this time we're going to call it timer. And unlike before, where it was set to 0, we're going to set it equal to a value. And I'm going to use 15, and this is going to be the number of seconds. You could do less if you'd like. You could do 5 seconds, or you could do more. You could do 30 seconds, whatever you want. Whatever value you put in here is going to be how long your counter, your timer works. Now we're going to actually decrement that counter, and so we're going to go ahead and just reuse this every few seconds. So we're going to add another one. We're going to say every X seconds, and we're going to use 0.1. So every 1/10 of a second, we're going to adjust that. So then the action for this is going to be system, subtract from. Now this time, make sure you pick timer, not score, and we're going to pick 0.1. So every 1/10 of a second, we're going to subtract 1 from our timer. Now we also have to add to our every tick the updating of that text box so that we can actually see it on the screen. So let's add a second action, and we're going to say timer text, and we're going to say set text, and we're going to use the timer variable. Now make sure you pick the one with the clock, timer, not time. All right, now if we run this, you'll see the timer immediately starts to count down from whatever value you set. And we still don't have the exit or the done condition in yet, but you can at least see that it's working. So there you go. And then when it hits 0, it's actually going to go negative values. And so that's when we'll actually catch it and say game over. All right, so now that it's hit 0, you see it just continues to go. So now we just need to add in the catch for when it's over. To determine when the clock has run out, we're just going to add another event, and we're going to say system compare variable, and we're going to use that timer variable again, and we're going to say if it's less than or equal to 0. So when it hits 0, we want this event to be triggered. And the action for this is going to be, we want to show up the game over message. And I see I didn't rename my game over. So let's go ahead and rename this to game over. All right, so now let's show the game over message. So we're going to say game over. We're going to say set visible. We're going to make it visible. And then we also want to move this to the front of the screen just like we were doing before. So let's say game over, and then let's use the move to top of the layer so that it's on top of anything else that might be on the screen. And then I think what we're going to do is pop all of our balloons that are on the screen. And the easiest way to do that is to actually just set the animation for all of them. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say balloon, and we're going to say set speed. Again, we're going to use the animation speed, and we're going to use the same value we used before, which was 15. So that's going to just have all of the balloons pop immediately when the game over shows up. So let's test that. So we've got the countdown, pop some balloons, let the clock run out. All right, so here we go. So there we go, game over. Now you'll notice the clock continued to go down, which is fine. We'll fix this here now, but we've got the game over message to show up, and then you notice all the balloons popped at the same time. So to fix it so our clock stops, what we're going to do is right here on row 7, we're just going to add another condition, and that's going to be if timer is greater than 0. So we'll right click here and say add another condition, and we're going to say system compare value, and then we're going to say if timer is greater than or equal to 0. So now it will only decrement counter if the counter is greater than or equal to 0. So let's go ahead and test that. So we'll wait till the counter gets down to 0. Okay, so now you see the clock stopped. Now you'll notice that it actually says -1, and that's just because of the way the rule gets worked for counting that, but it's fine. It's too much work to get that to actually say 0. So you might notice at the very bottom down here, you can see the balloons getting created and then destroyed again. The reason they're getting destroyed right away is because our timer is 0. So what happens is this actually gets called, so it immediately destroys our balloons when the timer is less than 0. So to fix that, we're just going to add another condition to row number 1 here. We're going to say add another condition, and we're going to say compare variable. And if our timer is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll go ahead and spawn more balloons. So that'll fix that problem. So now it'll only spawn balloons if our timer is greater than 0. So the very last thing to add would be a way to restart the game after it's over. And so we're going to do that, and it's real simple to do. The only thing we're going to do here is we're going to add, and we're going to say touch, we're going to say tap an object, and we're just going to go ahead and have the user tap the game over object. So if they tap the game over object, then what we're going to have happen is we're going to say system, and then we're going to say restart layout, and then the second thing we're going to do is system, and there's one called reset global variables. And what this does is it resets our timer back to 15 or whatever value you used, and it'll set your score also back to 0. So then it'll be like the game restarts. Now there's one other real minor thing that we'll add, and that is if you do this, because this is still on the screen, it's an invisible, you still may tap it while the game is playing, in which case you'll restart your layer. Real simple fix for that. We're just going to simply add another condition, right click, add another condition, and we're going to say game over, and we're going to say is visible. And what we're going to do here is then invert that. So we'll right click and say invert. So now if you tap it and it's not invisible, then it'll restart the game. If you tap it and it is invisible, it won't do anything. Therefore, your game won't restart just by accident. Okay, well there you go, completely done. There's a few things you could add as well, but I think this is probably a really good initial starting point for this game. We learned a few new things today, like the choose. We learned how to give it a list of objects and it will randomly pick one of them. We also learned about this on animation finished. So whenever that animation gets triggered, we can catch it and do something with it. In this case, we destroyed it. And then we also learned a little bit about how we can create a game timer to kind of create something that will force the user to finish within a specific set of time. And then we also did a few things with some multiple conditions, which we haven't done a lot of in the past. So I hope you enjoyed the game. So that's it. Thanks. Bye.